Diligence Portal. The portal includes several due diligence tools for middle and downstream users in the metals value chain, such as the maturity assessment tool, the individual and collective heat maps, due diligence policy formats. All these tools have been developed to support the companies to implement the OECD guidelines, step 1 to 6. Anouk, I will give you the floor.
Yes, Pauline, thank you very much. And thank you all for being present and for your interest in this session. Before I dive into the tool, I would like briefly to introduce the Social and Economic Council and how we are involved in the Metals Agreement. And afterwards, I will give you a brief digital tour through our web tool for due diligence, which we offer to the companies, member companies of the Metals Agreement, that supports them to implement due diligence in line with the OECD guidelines and the United Nations guiding principles. So let me share my screen. The Social and Economic Council, or in short, the SER, that is an independent advisory body for the Dutch government. As you can see on the picture on the right, that is the council itself. So the council consists of employers and workers' representatives and of independent experts that are academics. So this council provides input for the SER advices to the government on the social and economic policy. Next to the council, the SER is also engaged in other activities, among which the facilitation of different multi-stakeholder agreements. And some of these agreements are agreements on international responsible business conduct. So on this slide, you can see all the IRBC agreements that the SER facilitates. But for today, we dive into the due diligence tool of the Metals Agreement. So my colleagues and I from the SER also form the independent secretariat of this agreement. And before I start the digital tour in the web tool, I would briefly like to introduce some basic principles where the tool is built upon. So the starting point for the Metals Agreement in general are the OECD due diligence guidelines and the United Nations guiding principles. In the web tool, we also use the 6-step due diligence framework approach of the OECD as a starting point to create the different tools and templates or the elements in the portal, as you will see in a few minutes. So what we basically did is that we captured most of these steps. I think for most of you, they are familiar, but just to show you the link between our portal and the due diligence steps is that we take the companies through step 1 to 5 in different elements. So we start with a self-assessment questionnaire that is mainly focused on internal due diligence processes and their policy. Step 1, then we continue with step 2, which is the mapping of the supply chain and risk identification and prioritization of risks, followed by the development and implementation of a due diligence action plan. The Secretariat also involved in the monitoring of the individual companies, which is part of step 4. And last but not least, we also offer the reporting template to assist companies on their external communication about due diligence. So I will now share the due diligence portal with you, and I'll briefly go through it, some different elements. So companies that will log in will get their own secured environment where they can provide answers, but also can collect due diligence information for their company. This is a very secure portal, so only the companies themselves will get access to their environment and the independent secretariat, because we can assess and monitor the company's progress, and we can also provide feedback in this tool to share with the companies in order to improve their due diligence processes or make them more in line with the international guidelines. So as an example, as a company, you will log in and you will see your personalized dashboard. This dashboard consists of an overview of the progress of your due diligence implementation. It will say which elements are complete and which are still open, and it will also say what next action is expected from your company. So this will be a general overview of your due diligence implementation. Companies will get to fill in this tool every year, so that this also enables us as a secretariat to monitor companies' progress over the years. For today, I would like to highlight 3 elements of the tool. So first, the maturity assessment part. This is a self-assessment questionnaire for the companies to complete and covers all the due diligence steps. Secondly, the risk analysis section. So this section helps companies to map their supply chain and to do their risk analysis and prioritization of risks. And lastly, the action plan template, which helps companies to start with their due diligence action plan in order to improve and enhance their due diligence processes internally, but also in their supply chain. So first of all, companies will start with filling in this assessment each year. First year is a baseline assessment. So this questionnaire will start with a company profile, and this is done, it asks questions like what materials do you use and what is your position in the supply chain. This enables the rest of the questionnaire to be more tailor-made towards the context of that company. And it will cover the 6 different due diligence steps as described by the OECD guidelines. So by answering all these questions, the company will get an idea what is expected from it by the OECD guidelines. By completing all the questions, it will also get assigned a maturity level. Based on that, the company can see what the status is of due diligence implementation. And by filling in it every year, it can also see the progress it makes. So our aim is to support companies that are member for the agreement to reach full maturity within 5 years. As an example, I will show one of the questions. So companies can answer the question, provide an explanation, and also attach evidence to support their answer. So this way, the tool also helps companies to create one spot overview of all their due diligence documentation. And that could, for example, be useful for audits. After the maturity assessment, the next step will be the risk analysis. So this is the second due diligence step if you look at the due diligence cycle. The risk analysis section consists actually of 2 parts. The first part is a supply chain mapping exercise. So we ask companies to insert the materials that they work with. So you see some examples here. And for each material, we ask them to fill in which production locations are present for that material in this supply chain. So for example, for aluminium, there are some different production locations and some other geographical details, and also which production processes do take place at that stage of the supply chain. So with this information, the materials combined with the countries or the production locations, we ask the companies to add international RBC risks or due diligence risks. So that are risks for human rights, labor rights, or the environment. And we also ask the companies to scale them based on severity and likelihood. So the scaling of severity and likelihood, that can be based on reports, databases, but also by consulting other agreement participants like NGOs or trade unions. So after the risk analysis, this will result in a heat map for the individual companies. This is an example. And in this heat map, you will have in one overview all your most salient risks. So in this case, in the red area, you see an example. If you click on it, you see the deforestation in aluminium sourcing in Peru. It's just a fictional example, but to show you how the tool works. In one overview and prioritization of the most salient risks. Last but not least, companies will get access to a tailor-made action plan. So you can download the action plan on this page. The action plan will contain information on the maturity assessment results, so the answers provided. Based on that, it will give tailor-made example actions that the company can take to improve its internal due diligence processes, and it will also contain a list of the most salient risks in the heat map. And furthermore, it provides guidance for companies to write their actions in a smart way, so specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound.
Anouk.
These are some examples of the tool.
Anouk, can you hear me?
Yes.
Because we are getting to the time that you have to finish your presentation. It's very interesting. Perhaps you can round it off by, in a general sentence on whether it works, whether businesses have appreciated your tool so far. And perhaps you can say what is the role of the civil society within this tool and within this exercise? Yeah.
Yes, that's a good question, actually. So for the companies, we see they already make a lot of use of the tool. It is user-friendly, and we hear a lot of positive response on the use of the tool. Of course, as you mentioned, not only companies are part of the agreement, also civil society organizations, NGOs, trade unions, and their role in the agreement is very important as well. As there's close collaboration in the multi-stakeholder agreement, and civil society organizations are important in the entire due diligence process of companies. They can be consulted, they have a lot of expertise and experience on their subject fields, but they also have networks on the ground. So in that sense, they're also very important when companies would like to initiate a collective project on the ground. Yeah, that are some
of the very good thing, because I think that is a very nice bridge to our next presentation, because our next presentation that shows how we work in the sector agreements on metals is from the first collective project that the metals agreement has